Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Capital Finders podcast. We call this Business and Life Stories. Uh, really grateful for all of you that have been here for the first several that we've done already. Thanks for all the helpful comments. So, as you know, Capital Finders, our only business is helping you find capital for your business. This podcast is intended to provide inspirational stories from people and hopefully give you some positivity in your day. So this week, I'm in the hot seat. James will be interviewing me. I don't really have too much of an idea what he's going to ask, so here we go.
Hey, hi there, Mike. A pleasure to be here once again, sir. And how are you today?
Doing very well, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited because I've known you for quite some time now, and we are very regularly in touch with either business-oriented things or more falafel kind of fluff kind of orientated other passions, be it films or music. So we are very regularly talking, and I guess I feel very privileged to be able to have got to know you on a level beyond the business. And what I'd really like to be able to ask a few questions so you can share with our listeners is how I think one of your unique qualities is being able to bring past events and learn from them and see the relevance of what is happening in present events, right, in the present economic climate. But I would also like to explore some of your passions too. So without further ado, you're in the hot seat, and here we go. Mike. I consider myself a little bit educated on English history. I'm fairly ignorant about American history. Before meeting you, I was totally ignorant on Texan history. Now, that ignorance is a little bit less now because on your travels you've sent me these amazing photos of many important historical places and artifacts. And you've also told me stories which often tie into kind of modern day situations too. So one of my favorite ones you told me a couple of weeks ago, and it was something to do with Texans, understandably. The Texans, the Irish, exchanging of goods. I'd love to hear it again.
Yeah, so I learned that story, James, because right after college, I went straight to work. I was working 60, 70-hour weeks in engineering. Hadn't had a vacation for about 8 years. And my brother got a job in Leicester, England. And he said, hey, come on over. So I told my boss I was going to disappear for 3 weeks. He threatened to fire me, and I bought my plane ticket and off I went. So as one of the first things we did was to rent a car. We drove over through Wales, saw a lot of great stuff, met some amazing people. And we took the ferry to Ireland. And we got off the ferry about 4 a.m., raining, dreary, dark, cold, no idea where we're going. There's a light on, there was a pub open, we went in, and happened to be Wednesday night, or I guess it would have been early Thursday morning at that point, but
of course.
There's all these, what my brother referred to as pickled old guys in the pub. So just these guys that clearly retired, very old, very wizened looking. And when you travel, those are some of the greatest people to learn from, because they've got lots of time to sit and speak with you, and they want to share the cool stuff about their town. So one of the fellows asked us, are you boys Americans? And I will not butcher the Irish accent with my terrible rendition, but imagine the Irishman. And it's like, are you boys Americans? And my brother, without missing a beat, said, kind of, but we're Texans. And this big cheer went up. And the bartender came over and he's shaking our hands and everybody's excited. We're like, did we just step into an alternate reality? I mean, I certainly don't get this kind of reaction if I go to New York or California, but I got this reaction in Ireland. And
Fantastic.
turns out these guys were all World War II veterans. And during the war, the Germans were running blockades, understandably, because they're trying to stop the shipping. The British Navy was having a heck of a time trying to let merchant ships and cargo get through. And so the Irish had a long history of Irish immigration to the United States, and a number of Irish ended up in Texas. And somehow the governor of Texas just magically ended up making a contract with the Guinness Beer Company to ship massive amounts of guns in those containers of the beer ships, in a scheme that I'm sure this was not the official name in the Texas legislature, but for Texans, it was known as the Guns for Guinness maneuver. So the Guinness Company came over with full ships full of beer, and they went back with ships full of guns. And they managed to get through the submarine blockades, because I guess at the time there wasn't a large push on the side of the German Navy to necessarily sink beer ships. I mean, obviously they're going to sink what they could sink. They weren't a prime target. And so the Irish ended up being massively armed for an invasion which never happened. And as we know, the Germans never invaded Ireland. But these guys in the pub were just so excited to meet some real Texans. And they wanted to get in a drinking contest, which I politely declined. So, but yeah, that was just a lot of fun. And really, you just never know who you're going to meet, which is it's one of my business and life principles, is talk to people everywhere you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Guinness for Guns is such a great title. Like, copywriting was alive and well 100 years or
for sure.
80 years ago. But that is such a great story, and it really shows the human connection there across continents. And okay, here we go. So, having run your own equity fund for 20 plus years now, you've very graciously imparted bits of knowledge to me, in the hope that one day I might be able to make a few cents on a couple of investments. And it's sort of like what I said at the beginning. You have this. Your investing knowledge seems to incorporate a historical element to a certain degree, because obviously human behavior comes into investing, human behavior comes into business and marketing and sales, as we know. And as we all know, human behavior really changes very little year by year, decade by decade, century by century, millennia by millennia. It's really our situations. And a month or two ago, you were explaining about pump and dumps.
Yes.
And then you were giving an example of how it's nothing new. And you sort of mentioned about the 1930s and yachts and private yachts and champagne and jails. And I thought, could you tell me? It was such a great story because it's relevant to today as well. So yeah, hey, I mean, I know our listeners would love to hear it, and maybe the little tie-in to the relevance in today's market as well.
So the reason to study and learn from history is because even though history will never repeat exactly the same conditions in future time periods, it will often mirror, or as they say, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes sometimes. So that's a reason to learn history. The classic pump and dump, which we've seen with a number of stocks since this pandemic started, is you get first of all, you have to have the soul of a crook to do this. You have to really want to rip people off, which is a sad thing, but people are out there. You have to be prepared for them. And then you get someone who is a public figure of some sort. That could be musical celebrity, it could be an investing guru, it could be a politician, just somebody famous. And then you get that person to talk about how much they love shares of whatever company it is. Let's call it company A. Oh, company A is the greatest thing. You know, I'm buying bazillion dollars of this and so on. And so people start to buy in based on the celebrity of the face of the pitch, right? And it's like, oh, well, so-and-so must know something about stock. Now, how you don't get caught in a pump and dump is doing your own research, but people get fooled by these. And so as more and more people buy the stock, the price goes up. This is how capital markets work. The more people want of something, the more it costs to get it, right? Yes. And so the original initiators of the pump and dump scheme will then sell out at a point which they think is their target. So they may say, all right, once we're able to all put $5 million in our pocket, we're going to sell our shares. The minute they do that, they dump all these shares on the market. And when that happens, the price goes precipitously down. It's very hard to get out in time. Now, all of this is illegal. It's been illegal for a very long time. But the 1920s had a mixture of things happening, which we're seeing some of those happening now, but not to the same extent. What happened in the 20s was a booming economy. People with what we call disposable or luxury income, or money they didn't really worry about too much, they could spend it. And so people start buying stocks because they look like a good investment. Then more people came in behind them buying and pushing the prices up. And then came the people who didn't have money to spend. They were spending money that they were saving or the rent money or whatnot, but it was money that should not have been spending on stocks. Right. So everybody's rushing in, it's push up, push up, push up. Now there's a number of other factors going on that caused the market crash. We won't go into all those right now, but what happened was, because these prices were pushed out of all proportion to the values of the companies, when people realized this, people who could get out quickly made a lot of money in 1929. When that market crashed, though, a lot of people were caught with losses. And the thing is, if say that you had owned shares of maybe 20 different companies in 1929 and they crashed and they all went down basically to pennies a share. If you'd held 20, 25 companies, some of those would have survived into the 1930s and 40s. If you had not panicked and sold, the ones that survived took off. Beginning in World War II, in general, not all of them, but in general, beginning about World War II, 1950s and so on, they took off, which is another lesson. If you think an investment is worth purchasing and it crashes hard, there's no reason to sell it and take the loss unless one of two things is true. You can harvest the loss for your taxes. Now, that is not a tax loophole. That is available to any U.S. citizen that itemizes their taxes. You can do this, okay? Secondly, or not itemize, I said the wrong word, but that harvesting a loss is available to anybody doing business in the U.S. for their taxes. So unless that's true, you don't want to sell. The other reason you would sell after a hard crash is that you just don't have the constitution to stay in the market. It's just keeping you up at night. It's not worth it. But for everyone else, if there's a hard crash, you lose nothing by waiting, nothing, because the value's dropped so low from where you purchased it, you might as well hang on to it in the hopes that the company will somehow recover.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And did we see a repeat of that in the 1990s?
Saw it in the 90s, saw it in 2008, saw it in March 2020.
Sure. Yeah.
But for different reasons. History's rhyming, but it's not exactly repeating. 2008 was a result of the mark-to-market accounting rule that the federal government came up with. And I say politicians are hazardous to our fiscal health. Mark-to-market said that banks and other big firms had to keep changing the value of their assets depending on the day-to-day changes, which is idiotic. I mean, if I buy this headset, it's worth what I paid for it the day I bought it. And then over time it depreciates, it loses value. But
Absolutely.
or, I may have some super gamer headset that goes up in value, but that doesn't matter until I go to sell it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the government got involved and just boogered the whole financial system. But people who bought in the 2008 crash made a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
With the pandemic, we saw a massive lockdown, just governments all over the Western world shutting down companies for what I say is no good reason, but people will argue that point until the end of time. But the point is, it shut down businesses. It didn't change the underlying value. It didn't change what they're making. It just made everybody stop. So again, if you bought shares in good companies, you've done very well.
There we go. Hey, thank you for sharing. I would imagine what I know is a tiny percentage of all your knowledge, but even so, there's some absolute gold nuggets there. And really, though, those principles apply to running a business too. I mean, it is having the constitution, isn't it, to actually ride through multiple failures, hard times, tough conditions, and to ride it through. And we should cover that. We should come back to that in a couple of questions. But my next question is more about how you got in and how you gained your knowledge about not just the financial markets, but about startups too. So I know that you're a rocket engineer a few moons ago now, and then you opened and then you began an equity fund a few years after that. So I know what a lot of people would be interested to know, as I was when I first got to know you, was how did you make the transition from being a rocket engineer, figuring out how to safely send astronauts into space, to managing people's money and knowing how to safely manage that. So yeah, can you just tell us a little bit about that transitional story there, Mike?
Yeah, I loved working on aerospace, rockets, and life support systems, GPS systems for navigation. I love doing all of that. It was a lot of fun. And after about 8-9 years into it, it's about the time when you're really becoming a transitioning from a good engineer to on the path to becoming something greater. It takes about that amount of time. So I was right on the cusp of that transition. And I was just tired of working 70 hours a week, watching my managers get bonuses, watching the company CEO and the press blabbing on and looking at his bonuses. And I said, this is not working for me, but I love the work. So I started paying more attention to our suppliers, our customers. Obviously, US government was our biggest customer, but we had smaller commercial customers. And I just, I started thinking about how would I solve the problems in their companies if I had the chance, because engineers are trained to solve problems is what we think about all the time. Well, fast forward until I was about the 18-year mark in my engineering career, and I just got out. A number of things happened, and I just got out. And at that point, I was very excited to get out. And I thought, well, I'll take all that knowledge that I've amassed and put it to work investing in stocks. Now, remember, I'd been able over those years to study different companies from the inside. It's like going to suppliers and seeing how they run and what problems they're having and so on. And same with our customers and of course, inside our own company. I also knew that, there were insider trading laws. So I was never in a position where that would apply to me. That typically applies to company officers. And I was not at that level. But just to avoid any potential hassle, I didn't start investing until after I was out of the business. Now, during that time, I must have read thousands, 2,000, 3,000 pages of annual reports, investing books, websites, all kinds of things. And I just dug and dug and dug. And I started learning these principles of investing. And so I tested it myself. When I had gone from $10,000 initial investment to almost 4 million, then I knew I had something I could farm out to other people, because now I've got the track record. I can prove it.
Yeah.
I've got everything that a potential investor would want to see. And then you asked about how Capital Finders came about, because I was seeing so many startups fail, and that's fine. But when they fail with my money and they fail with my clients' money, that's not fine. So either I'm not doing a good enough job filtering and investing in the right ones, or there's something that they are missing as startups that they need from someone like me. And so we started Capital Finders to teach people how to get money for their business. Of course, we do a lot more than that, but that's the main thing we focus on.
Fantastic. And
So I guess to sum it up, I'm completely unemployable by anybody, and I had to start my own company.
Fantastic. Like all the best entrepreneurs are, mate.
Indeed.
So that'll be a great segue over to what I was going to ask next, actually. So you've just told us how you really dug into thousands of pages of financial reports, and then you figured out. And I know you told me in the past that you would invest in these companies, or even suppliers back in the day would go bust, and you would sort of think, why does it happen? Because they've got a great product, or they've got a great service. Like, why did this happen? And then you've been in Austin, what, 25 years or something, or quite a while, right?
Yeah.
So and that's got a very, very vibrant, or until recently, a very, very vibrant startup scene, right? So I guess what I'd be interested in, what our listeners would love to know is from all the ways which you've been involved in supporting and advising startups and early stage companies, plus all the startup meetups and all the pitches you've heard, and the VC pitches and everything else. What are some of the most common mistakes which you've heard and seen, where companies, even with a great product, have still gone bust because they haven't been able to close anyone on supplying extra funding or being able to access further funding?
Yeah, I've seen several things. I think the most helpful one for our listeners is probably that when you are looking for funding, you need to be able to put yourself in the seat of the investors or the potential investors. So you're either going to be meeting on Zoom, or you're going to be in person in a room somewhere. But if you don't understand how they think and what they're looking for, your odds of getting funded go down quite a bit. And so you need to know the difference between angel investors, venture capital firms, private equity, which is involved with the other two, but it's not always the same thing. And there are, of course, funds, investment funds, and those are all different ways of investing, and different, it will come with different attitudes and so on. And coupled with that, as a founder or the startup face of the company, or whatever your job might be, no one cares what you look like, or how old you are, or any of that stuff. What does matter, did you dress professionally for whatever that company is? It's not a suit and tie for everybody, but did you dress professionally for the kind of clients you're going to go after? Because if you can't do that for the presentation, the confidence drops, right? The other thing is, if you come in with some kind of a social message or political message, you're probably not getting funding. Stick to the business. So what other questions did you have?
Yeah, I was just I was thinking, because we've also seen, haven't we, that some startups go on and on about their product without really considering what the investors might be looking for from their perspective, right? Is there just one or two aspects about that which you see as sort of common mistakes, which as being an investor, yourself, instantly closes the doors, and then there are other things which for you just open the doors, the same product but maybe just this simple way of presenting, right?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So have a working product or service. If you have a prototype, understand that many of the investors, let's reverse that a little bit. Most of the investors that you get in front of have made their own money. There are a few that inherit it, of course, but most of the ones you're going to get to as a startup have made their own money in some way. And they've got a little bit of sense of what it takes to be successful. So if you don't have anything that works, the first thing you need to do when you go into that meeting is go, this is in prototype stage, and immediately go straight into no more than 2 or 3 minutes of how you think this is going to look when it goes into production. Because there are many investors that will go early on, but for most of us, we want you to have a working product or service, something you've tested out, you know where your market is. Phrases that you don't ever want to use. Don't say this is for everybody. It's not. Okay. Even Thomas Edison, when he invented the electric light bulb, didn't try to say this was for everybody. He said what? It's going in every home in America. Right? So there were whole communities of people back then that didn't have electricity yet. He wasn't trying to sell to them at that point. He wanted investors to help him get into production to sell to the homes that were existent. So know your market.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Once again, Mike, some gold there. Now, the final question is about one of your passions, music.
Oh, yeah.
I guess if anyone was a non-musician in Austin, it would almost be like being a non-skier in Aspen, perhaps, or Chamonix. But I know that you've. I think it's fair to say that you've indulged in the wonderful opportunities you've had over the last couple of them decades to see some fantastic musicians, the homegrown ones, the ones who have traveled there and made Austin their home, but also the bigger groups who have also stopped off at Austin on their national tours. So I guess out of 20 plus years of seeing live gigs in Austin, are there any particular standouts or stories, or maybe local characters you've met who, are there a couple of amusing, interesting, or otherwise stories or occasions would you like to share?
Yeah, that's one thing that's so much fun about the music scene in Austin is the kinds of musicians that will come here and play the smaller clubs, almost by definition, are not standoffish. They're not snobs. They're not, part of that is we don't have a large paparazzi here. Like, pretty famous musicians can play a very small club and not be mobbed in this town. But the first key I want to offer to everybody is just talk to everybody. You go to hear music, bands take breaks. We all know this. So you go up and talk to the band, because you might be the only person in the whole place that's actually come up and talked to them, and they'll talk to you. So yeah, some of the people I've met, Jimmy Vaughn of the Fabulous Thunderbirds, just phenomenal guitarist. Willie Nelson, just in the back of a club listening to another band, because that's the other thing. Professional musicians tend to go see other musicians play. And I went to see Christine Albert and Chris Gage, who are a pretty well-known local duo here, and they played all over the world. But they're more like the kind of people that play for other musicians and other bands, but they're really good on their own. So I'm sitting there listening to them in a small place, and it was just I think the next youngest person in there was like 70, so it was a crowd of older folks in there, and there's a younger guy sitting not too far away from me and my wife, and I went to talk to him. It's Alejandro Escovedo, who was in the Texas Tornadoes, who's just one of the premier accordion and conjunto players in the world. I mean, I don't know how many gold records this guy has. But yeah, he's just sitting there drinking a beer. We go over and talk to him, and no idea who he is. And all of a sudden, one of there's Chris or Christine says, "Hey, we got a guest here tonight. He's going to come sing a couple songs." And he gets up, and we're just like, "Oh my gosh." And then one I know you'd love, because you're as listeners of our show know, you're a pretty well-known bluesman back in the day, 20 something years ago. I went to this tiny place in South Austin. One of these places they never advertise. You walk in, there might be maybe 10 people in there. It's kind of it's a bar that the owner started because she just wanted to have a bar. She didn't really care about making money. So I had called them the day before, said, "Can I bring my son? And he's only 17. Can he come?" He said, "Oh yeah, bring him." Okay, good. So we go in because I wanted him to start hearing live music at more of an adult level. He's grown up hearing music, but not some of the more prominent acts. And so this guy gets up on stage and starts singing and playing, and I go, "Holy cow, that's Bob Dylan's guitar player. That's Charlie Sexton. Not on the bill. Nobody knew he was coming." And I just love things like that. It's like, which is why I have such a love of, and that's how I've gotten to know a lot of these folks, because I talk to all of them, and most of them are very friendly, but it's another life lesson I want to share with listeners. It's so cool. Like, my knowledge is investing, so I share a lot of that for free in various venues. And the customers, the clients, they come, but I don't look at everybody as a dollar. And that's what I share in common with so many of these musicians. Even though I can't play a note, we have the same mentality of, hey, let's get out there and let's share our gift. And, there's a time to make money, and there's a time to help people out. And you do both. Can you stand another music story, James?
Absolutely, mate. Far away, man.
I'd been telling my older son, the dangers of not imbibing in various illegal substances. And like a lot of high schoolers, he wanted to experiment. And it's a good dad. I was like, no, don't, explaining all the dangers. So we got out to a concert that W.C. Clark was doing, famous bluesman. We were talking to him, and my son says, "Yeah, can I help you pack up your stuff and move it out to your van?" He's like, "Yeah, come on out, give me a hand." So I've trained my kids to, try to be helpful and engage with people. And as soon as the guy opens the back doors of the van, this cloud of pot smoke comes wafting out. I'm like, I've just done weeks of trying to work with this kid.
Oh, fantastic. What a great story. Oh, man. But hey, it often goes hand in hand with the musicians.
It does not in investing does not go together. Certainly doesn't go together with engineering, but there's a whole other world.
Yeah. And it is good to, I mean, as you know, that my interest in Eastern philosophy, and there's a yin and a yang to everything, and it's almost as if music's your yin, it's just more feminine, more softer than the harder world of finance and analysis and all of that. We really need that, Mike, in business, hey, to have that yin and yang to keep us on an even keel.
I think that's our prime predictor of whether a startup's going to fail is how much pressure the founder puts themselves under. Yeah. Are you going to be working 70-hour weeks as a founder? Yes, undoubtedly. But as soon as you can, you need to partner up with people that can take some of that load, because if you're not exercising, if you don't have some outlet, whether that's concerts or art or, if you don't have something different than the business that you do, your chance of burnout is so high that we rarely invest in those kinds of startups.
Interesting. And a great tip there. Or almost a subliminal tip. It isn't like a really
yeah.
Is it? But experience from the trenches. Mike, hey, I really appreciate your time and being able to take us a little bit down your road of interests and knowledge and expertise there. I think we've covered a few bases. Is there any parting words you would like to leave with our listeners before you sign off?
Yeah, we love hearing from listeners. There's an email link below. There's a link to the website. Send your comments, good or bad. If you have ideas for future podcasts, guests you'd like to see, let us know. If you are looking for funding for your business, of course, you can always contact us for that. That's our business. But regardless of that, we love it. We love hearing from listeners. And if you're a startup, even if you want to be on the show and talk to us about what you're doing, let us know.
Excellent. That was a great finish, Mike, and a great session. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right. Thanks, James.